Hello, Scruff Turds. Welcome back to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Scruffy Tales. And in this video, we will be highlighting the fact that Russia grinds on in Kursk, gaining territory and pushing Ukraine back. And as you can see here on the ISW map, you can see, according to them, that Russia is advancing here. They're also gaining ground here where we have a forest. And more importantly, they are gaining ground here south of the river Snagost and have reached almost the border here. So the question is, are these Ukrainians trapped, or can they just jump over the border and avoid getting captured or killed? Hopefully they can just advance across the border and avoid Russian captivity and Russian bullets. But fact remains, Russia has been steadily pushing eastward, forcing Ukraine back. Ukraine is losing ground along this western flank of the incursion, of the main operation, which puts in question what's going on over here. Is this operation, is the intention to come up behind Russians and attack them in the rear and link up with the friendly forces? That seems increasingly difficult because the Russian line is moving away from the Ukrainians over here. Meanwhile, they seem to be very static. They're not moving eastward. So the distance between the Ukrainians is increasing. Is the point of this operation to draw Russian forces away from the front line to tie up Ukrainians over here? Doesn't seem to be happening either. So what is going on? What are the Russians doing? Are they ignoring this, or what's happening? And I will come to that later on. But we will now focus on the Russian advances into Ukrainian controlled territory. And here we have Andrew Perpetua. Here we have Noel reports. Andrew Perpetua has, interestingly enough, he has the Russian advance in the south, but he also has Ukraine pushing in here into the forest here. Also, Ukraine is pushing north here, according to Andrew Perpetua. However, this push here kind of lines up with this, and Noel Reports has had this Ukrainian sliver for days and weeks. So not sure if this is Andrew being late to the game. And I mean, these two maps don't align at all, because Noel Reports just had this section of the front line fall to Russian hands entirely. Meanwhile, Andrew Perpetua says that Ukraine is advancing in this. You can see this forest here. So very strange. These mappers do not align at all. And Noel Reports also obviously it does not have a Russian advance in the south. But as we saw on the ISW map, it does appear as if Andrew Perpetua is spot on, as he is making this area here contested. We have a Russian push south, moving south of the river Snagost, coming up on Yubimovka from the southern flank. Moving on with the Ukraine control map and deep state. Ukraine control map aligns with ISW and Andrew Perpetua. We have a strong Russian push south of River Snagost. Russia is pushing up around the forest. And they also have Andrew Perpetua has an arrow on his map indicating this push, but the Ukraine control map shows us a contested area pushing in south here at the Kremyanao. Kremanoe, and Deep State has had that push on its map for a couple of days, but according to Deep State, Ukraine has managed to move in and isolate this push. Bit unclear if that's true or not, but something is going on here. We have a Russian push at least towards Kremanoe from the north, and the question is if Ukraine has addressed it or not. But as you can see, it quite clearly shows us the Russian intentions moving in on Yubimovka and coming in on from the south and Kremanoye from the north in a pincer move with the intention of forcing this part of the Ukrainian front line to fall back with this narrow route of retreat being in danger of being cut off. The Ukrainians, if Russia has any more success in this pincer move, these Ukrainian forces will have to fall back pretty quickly before they are cut off. We also don't see any advances here from Russia on the deep state map. That might be updated in short order tonight. Same goes for the Russian advances down here. But I think deep state will eventually fall in line and show us what we're seeing on ISW, Andrew Perpetua, and the Ukraine control map. So what are the Russians trying to achieve with this big push in the south? I think what they're after is coming up northward, northeast, in between the river Snagost. This is the river Snagost. It comes down this way, you have lakes and what have you, and then the river continues down here. I think Russia wants to push up along the river into this bulge here because they want to reach this location up here. So this push here is not aimed at Yubimovka. This push is intending to go past Yubimovka, south of the river, to reach this point. Because here you can actually get across the river at this road here. It appears to be a dam of sorts right here. And so if they can reach this far south of Yubimovka, they can then push across the river and bypass the lakes and what have you at this point, and then reach the highway here and to cut the supplies going north. And like I said in previous videos, this is what the Russians are after. They tried to reach this crossroad along this highway through Yubimovka. That's failed. And I'm thinking they're now trying hard to reach this point, to reach the main supply route. And if Russia can cut this road, then those Ukrainians in the north will struggle in terms of logistics and supplies. And that will only hasten the Ukrainian decision to withdraw from that area entirely. So yes, Russia is on a roll. They are determined to push along this front line. They are not sidetracked by this push. Obviously, they are allocating forces this way, but they are not sidetracked from this advance. And that is something we're seeing from the Russians time and time again. When they have a goal set out, they keep going for it no matter what is going on around them. Same thing with Pokrovsk. Kursk got invaded, and the Russians made sure that they went for Pokrovsk, and they pulled reinforcements from every other location along the front line except Pokrovsk to handle Kursk. And it's the same thing here. They are intent on pushing through Yubimovka to reach the highway. And when this happened, they have now pulled reinforcements from here and there. But the main push is still their primary concern. So they aren't distracted. They know that if they give up on this and have to pull over here, Ukraine can counterattack, and then they're trapped between them. So they realize they have to push this front line as far away from Glushkovo as possible to deny Ukraine a chance to attack the Russians in a pincer move, right? So they are steadily moving towards Yubimovka and trying to reach this highway here that will sever Ukrainian logistics if Russia reaches it, and that will put a lot of pressure on the Ukrainians up here and forcing them to make a decision: hold on no matter what, or fall back to ensure that they can receive proper logistics to be able to fight on. Anyway, so that's a brief look at this front. Now we'll take a look at what's happening over here at Glushkovo. Veseloye, according to ISW, is in Russian control. According to ISW, Russia has pushed out, or claims to push out southward. Ukraine has pushed westward and are not on the border towns here, but closing in. And if we take a look at Andrew Perpetua, we can see that he has expanded Ukrainian control somewhat to the west, and that Ukraine is beginning to enter these two border towns. This is important because this is where Ukraine can bring in logistics to support the fighting in this area. I don't think he has expanded Ukrainian control eastward, but I mean, we can see here that Ukraine has blown up Russians in this small village of Glushkovo, who shares a name with this larger town, Glushkovo. And Ukraine keeps attacking and bombing Veseloye, so just like Andrews shows us, it is not in Ukrainian control. If we can geolocate various bombs and missiles and what have you hitting this town. Interestingly enough, Noel Reports claims that Veseloye is in Ukrainian control. A bit weird if we keep seeing bombs hitting the town, but they are also, just like Andrew, pointing out that Ukraine appears to be pushing westward and are almost in control of the border towns, which should open up logistics from within Ukraine to flow into this Glushkovo operation, providing further support and supplies to the frontline troops. And this is important if Ukraine wants to stand any chance of pushing on towards Glushkovo and the river. And we also have this small incursion over here that all the other mappers have linked with the contested areas surrounding these two main pushes. Just as we can see here on the Deep State map. Deep State, as well as the others, have Veseloye as under Russian control, and Ukraine is, as we can see, operating outside Veseloye and eastward, closing in on this incursion here. Deep State does not show that Ukraine is pushing west to the border towns, but I think if we take a look at ISW, Andrew Perpetua, and Noel Reports, I think we can assume that Ukraine is indeed moving westward towards these border towns. And then we have the Ukraine control map, and this is kind of wild. Ukraine control map has the push towards Veseloye here. Veseloye is contested, which seems to be accurate. They also have Ukraine pushing west and claims that the border towns here are contested, which may or may not be true. Ukraine is certainly, would be my guess, on the outskirts here of these two border towns. So I think it's a fair assessment that they are contested, with Ukraine trying to push into these two border towns. What's going on down here? I have no idea, but this I don't know. But I mean, Ukraine, the Ukraine control map, as you can see, they tried to base their arguments on geolocated positions and what have you. The reason why they have Ukraine this far out with contested areas is because you have Ukrainians moving here and you have Russian vehicles being destroyed in this small village. But down here, this is from a couple of weeks ago when Ukraine had pushed this far, but I don't know why this is contested, since we don't have any dots of any kind down here explaining it. But ignoring this, I think this is a fair assessment. You have Ukraine trying to push in over here, so yes, these villages could be contested. Ukraine is most definitely trying to push into Veseloye, so that town should be contested, even if Ukraine maybe hasn't really entered the town itself yet. And there is no doubt about it. We have Ukrainians moving over here. We have seen multiple geolocated Ukrainian vehicles moving along these fields here. So this is contested area where the Either the Ukrainians have pushed out and been forced back, or are currently trying to push through Russian lines. So if we use Andrew Perpetua's map here for a moment, the very common narrative from pro-Ukrainians at the moment is that this push into Glushkovo is supposed to be this master plan outflanking maneuver that will catch the Russians in the rear. I have never truly felt that was the case. I have always leaned towards that Ukraine wants to reach the river to isolate this part of Russia, and that the pincer move, the attack in the rear, might be a secondary objective if the opportunity presents itself. And I think the current front lines kind of suggest it. Now, Andrew has Ukraine kind of far out to the east here, but I'm thinking, for the sake of argument, I'm moving the Ukrainian lines back a bit. I think we can all agree that this is where Ukraine is operating in this area. Maybe not fully in control, but they are operating in this area of Glushkovo Rayon, of the Glushkovo County, right? So if Ukraine wants to push east and link up with friendly forces, that's 24, 25 kilometers. I doubt, and this front line is falling back on top of it all. So I doubt Ukraine wants to push east to link up with friendly forces. There is a good case that Ukraine might want to try and move along this railroad here to reach the Snagos River, and in so doing begin to take control over various bridges, and that would trap the Russians south of the river. But that's 14 to 15 kilometers for Ukraine to push through Russian defenses before they can reach that far. The question is that really what they're after, considering they are trapped and stuck, not trapped, but stuck on the Saloye, and they haven't really reached this highway here yet. They are really struggling pushing through Russian lines in the area. So if they want to have some form of operational success, Ukraine is 6 to 7 kilometers away from the same river. English language, it can be troublesome at times. And roughly 3 to 4 kilometers, maybe 5 kilometers away from Glushkovo, this main town, the capital of this county. These two pushes seem questionable at the moment. Russia is forcing Ukraine back. Meanwhile, they appear to be containing the Ukrainians to a degree here in Glushkovo. Ukraine is in a poor position to push out all the way to friendly forces here. Snagost, doable if they have a breach, but then we need to have that breach in a couple of days. So I think I'm sticking with my gut feeling that Ukraine is after reaching the river and securing the town of Glushkovo in order to cut off this entire area here, and in so doing will begin mop-up operations between the river and the border to lay claim to this territory and occupy it. And I just want to highlight, though, all that said about distances here and there, Ukraine does have options of bringing in forces from the south along these two highways. That may happen to try and catch the Russians off guard, and they may push up here to link up with forces over here. They may push in here to attack Russians in the rear and link up with friendly forces over here. And this may be, maybe we'll see something like that. Ukraine pushing up this way to reach Snagos, this way to link up with friendly forces over here and continue towards Snagost. That may happen. Yeah, you never know. But at the moment, no, I'm still leaning towards Ukraine's main objective is to reach the River Seine and to grab the town of Glushkovo. So what are the Russians after? Why does it appear as if Russia is ignoring this? Why aren't they pulling forces from this front line to address this? What is going on? Well, I think Russia's goal is to mainly contain this. Like I said, when Russia sets out to achieve something, they focus on it and ignore everything else. So I think Russia will just try and contain this, and Ukraine will more or less be allowed to occupy this area here. Russia can't come in from the north due to river. Russia can't come in from the south due to this being Ukraine. So Russia will just try and contain it so that they won't get attacked in the rear. Ukraine will conduct operations and clean up operations and secure this entire region. And this will allow Russia to focus on coming in this way to grab the highway, at the same time applying pressure from the north and from the east, or from the west, to force this pocket of Ukrainians to fall back, because when they have no support through the supply route, they can't hold against the pressure from the north and the west. They will fall back to consolidate their forces, to not lose men needlessly, and that may force Ukraine to abandon this area here as well, depending on what Russia does. And so that is what I think is going on. Russia is at the moment ignoring this. They can deal with that at a later date. What they are focusing on is having operational success here, and they want to force Ukraine back away from Koronevo, and they will then focus on pushing towards Sudzha, leaving this area for a later date. Something like this. Like I said, they will isolate, be happy with isolating Glushkovo, holding this line, containing this issue, and then focus everything they have on pushing Ukraine back towards Sudzha. Ukraine will, over time, this will not happen in a week or two. This will probably take months, probably continue into 2025, is my guess. Ukraine will, over time, fall back to this river that follows along Sudzha and up north. And this will be Ukraine's defensive line. And as we've seen in Chasiv Yar and Vovchansk and elsewhere, Russia will more than likely truly struggle into pushing into Sudzha, because Russia doesn't handle towns and they don't handle rivers all that well. And when you combine those two, it's a real problem for Russia. So Sudzha will probably hold. The question is if Ukraine can hold the river to deny Russia coming in from the flanks. But that's a different story. I think Ukraine will hold this area for a long time, and Russia will apply pressure. And then the question is, when will Russia focus on Glushkovo? Is it after they've taken Sudzha, or is it when they have pushed Ukraine back here, will they then begin operations towards Glushkovo? Who knows? But I mean, I think Russia will be happy about just containing this for as long as possible while they are focusing on this part of the battlefield. So, well, yeah, I think Ukraine will grab this area because Russia will basically allow it. And Russia will force Ukraine out of this area. And over time, I think Russia will keep applying pressure and force Ukraine back. And I think this is kind of part of the Ukrainian plan, because doing this will force Russia to allocate more and more manpower to achieve this. And that they have to pull more manpower from elsewhere. Putin has said that they're going to recruit another 180,000 troops partially to support the front line down in Ukraine, and partially to support the advances here in Kursk, more than likely. And it will cost Russia manpower and time. This will continue well into 2025, is my guess. And I think Russia will try and contain Ukraine over here. And what Ukraine could do if when Russia begins to push Ukraine back over this way, when the distance between these two front lines is, you know, uh, too great for either side to actually do something to affect either front line, then Ukraine could maybe launch an assault from the south along these two highways to catch these Russians off guard and from behind. And then the Russians over here will potentially be too far away to effectively assist their friendly forces over here if Ukraine can trap the Russian line over here between Glushkovo and this push from the south. I mean, this is entirely made up in my mind that this might happen. But I'm pretty convinced that this will happen and that this will happen and that Ukraine will over time fall back. Because what is it? I think Ukraine has 10 to 15,000 troops in the area and Russia has 40 to 60,000. I mean, Ukraine is not in a good position to try and outmaneuver the Russians anywhere. So it's a foregone conclusion, I guess, to an extent. But Ukraine can slow down the process and force Russia to waste as much manpower as possible as they're falling back. Ukraine, that is. And I think that is the overall goal of Ukraine, to push into push into Kursk, force Russia to allocate vast numbers of troops to the area and weakening the other front lines. And then as Ukraine gets overwhelmed, they will slowly fall back to more defendable positions, and Russia will lose thousands of troops in the process as Ukraine is falling back. And maybe we'll see another push from Ukraine here, like we saw here, to cause more havoc to the Russians eventually in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, next year, who knows. We'll see what happens. And that's the end of the video. And well, yeah, there's no way you can deny it. You can't shut your eyes to it. Russia is advancing. Russia is grinding on, forcing Ukraine back. And if they reach that highway outside of Yubamovka, then Ukraine is in trouble. And those northern forces may have to fall back in its entirety to avoid being encircled and cut off. But like I said, I think Ukraine actually will grab Glushkovo as intended, and that Russia will allow it to happen essentially and focus entirely on reaching Sudzha before they even consider pushing in towards Glushkovo. If it happens, I guess we'll have to wait and see. But that's my prediction at any rate. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. That's it. That's all I have for you this time around. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine. Give them hell.